Hi, this is Kale from sewingmachineshop.com, and if you're experiencing skip stitches on your sewing machine, then you've come to the right place. What are skip stitches? On a sewing machine, skip stitches occur when the machine's upper thread and bobbin thread fails to form a complete stitch, resulting in gaps or missing stitches in the fabric. You can see in this photo here, the bottom seam is perfect, no skip stitches. Top seam, skip stitch here, 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 and several in a row here. Skip stitches can occur on any stitch pattern, straight stitch, zigzag, decorative stitch. They can occur on sergers or cover stitch machines, when you do embroidery on a bona fide embroidery machine. Any machine that sews is susceptible to skip stitches. Skip stitches most commonly occur when the hook mechanism fails to catch the thread loop thrown by the needle. In this video animation, you're going to see the needle come down. The needle thread, which is green, forms a loop behind the eye of the needle, and the hook mechanism comes around, catches that loop, takes it around the hook mechanism where the green thread forms a loose knot with the yellow bobbin thread. However, when the needle comes down and the hook fails to catch the thread loop, that's when skip stitches occur. I've put together a skip stitch troubleshooting flowchart for you to follow, and if you perform the following troubleshooting steps in order, then you will greatly increase your chances of solving the problem. Step 1 is insert a fresh needle. A bent needle, even one that's ever so slightly bent, can negatively affect the machine's needle hook clearance and cause skip stitches. Whenever I experience skip stitches or someone comes into the shop and complains of skip stitches, the first thing I do is insert a new needle and see if that solves the problem. A bent needle can throw off the machine's needle hook clearance. If you look in this photo on the left here, this is our hook, this is the needle, there's a little bit of daylight in between. With a bent needle, here's our hook, here's our bent needle, there's no daylight in between. The needle is deflecting off the hook, which can cause skip stitches. If the needle's bent the other way, and there's too much room between the hook and the needle, then the hook will not only pass behind the needle, it'll pass behind the thread loop thrown by the needle, which results in skip stitches every time. Remember, when you insert a new needle, the flat side of the needle needs to face the back on the majority of home sewing machines, except for semi-industrial straight stitch machines like the Juki TL series, Janome HD9. On those machines, the flat faces the right side. Another note on needle insertion, slide the needle all the way up until the butt of the needle touches the stopper pin. Step 2 is to make sure you're using the correct needle type for the fabric. You want to match your needle type and the size of your needle to the fabric you're using. For example, stretch fabric calls for a stretch needle. Thicker fabric requires a larger needle because a small needle can have trouble penetrating the thick fabric, making it more difficult for the loop to form at the needle eye. There's a few great resources online for picking the right needle size and needle type for your fabric. The Schmetz Needle Guide is a fantastic source of information. Another great source of information is my Substack article titled All About Needles. I'll link you to both these sources of information in the video description below. Step 3 in troubleshooting skip stitches is to make sure that you are using quality thread. Whenever someone brings in a machine and it complains of skip stitches, I always make sure to test it with thread that I truly trust to be good quality. Thread brands I trust include Orifil, Mettler, and Isocord. The reason this is important is because poor quality thread possesses certain characteristics that hinder the machine's ability to create a thread loop successfully. Kinks in the thread will cause snagging. Unnecessary stiffness in the thread will make it difficult for the thread to form a loop that's easy for the hook mechanism to catch. Thread that's unnecessarily sticky will stick on itself or the needle and create a really distorted thread loop that's impossible for the hook mechanism to catch. Step 4 is to perform the pull test, which is a troubleshooting exercise my dad taught me when I was first learning how to fix machines. The pull test is simple. First, you unthread your sewing machine completely. You raise the presser foot to the raised position. You also put the needle in the highest position, which you can do by the hand wheel, by turning it towards you if you have a mechanical machine, or using the needle up-down button if your machine has a needle up-down button. Then you rethread the entire machine, but stop before threading the needle. With the presser foot in the raised position, lightly pull on the thread. You should feel no tension and the thread should pull freely. Now lower the presser foot and pull on the thread. You should feel significant tension on that thread. As you perform the pull test, ask yourself, do you feel thread snagging when you pull the thread with the presser foot in the raised position? Remember, the presser foot in the raised position means the thread is under a zero tension condition. It should pull freely, however, If you're pulling freely, and every few centimeters you feel a little snag, then you need to try to find out where that snag is coming from. Common causes of thread snagging include the spool cap being too big or too small for the thread spool itself, a burr in the plastic of the spool cap, a burr on the machine's plastic cover that the thread's catching on, or compacted lint that's found its way into the upper thread path and the thread's having trouble passing through that lint freely. Step 5 in troubleshooting skip stitches builds on step 4, which is check for other obstructions along the upper thread path and the lower thread path. Whether it be the needle thread or the bobbin thread, the thread must flow freely from the thread source as your sewing machine sews and makes stitches. There are many points along the thread path where obstructions can occur. Needle strikes on the bobbin case can cause skip stitches. Needle strikes on the needle plate hole can also cause skip stitches. A loosely wound bobbin causes skip stitches. Compacted lint in the bobbin case area causes skip stitches. And adhesive on the needle, hook, or bobbin case can also cause skip stitches. If you've gone through steps 1 through 5 and you're still experiencing skip stitches, check the machine's needle hook timing. In order to check the timing, remove the bobbin case and needle plate so that you get a clear view of the hook point as it passes behind the needle. Then, turn the machine's hand wheel towards you so that the needle is in its bottommost position. Continue to slowly turn the hand wheel until the hook passes behind the needle. The hook should pass just above the needle eye when the needle has risen a couple of millimeters above its bottommost position. If the hook point is passing underneath the needle eye or way above the needle eye, then the machine is probably out of time and needs to be taken to a trained technician. Here's an example of perfect needle hook time. As the hook point passes behind the needle, it's passing just a little bit above the eye so that it can catch the thread loop that forms at the eye of the needle. Here's an example of advanced needle hook time. As the hook point passes behind the needle, it's passing above the eye, but it's passing so far above the eye that the thread loop has yet to even form. If you have advanced needle hook timing, you'll experience skip stitches and you'll need to take it to a trained technician to get fixed. Here's an example of what sewing machine technicians refer to as retarded needle hook timing. The hook point is slow to arrive at the needle, so it passes below the eye of the needle. In this case, the thread is already formed at the eye of the needle, so the hook point passes below the thread loop and you get skip stitches. Again, if you have this type of bad needle hook timing, you'll have to take it to a trained technician to get fixed. Step 7 is to check the machine's needle hook clearance. When the hook passes behind the needle, the hook must pass within a specific distance range from the back of the needle in order to catch the thread loop. I've shown this graphic before, but I think it's worth showing again. You don't want the hook to be so close that it touches the needle. As you can see in the photo on the right here, here's the needle, here's the hook point. The needle is deflecting off the hook point. There's no space in between the two. On the other end of the spectrum, when the hook passes behind the needle, you don't want the hook to be so far away from the needle that it passes behind the thread loop instead of passing through the thread loop. If they're too far apart, that's what will happen. If this is the needle and my loop is forming behind the needle, I want my thread pretty close but not touching, so it passes through that thread loop. If needle hook clearance is excessive and my hook is back here and my thread loop's back here, then it's going to pass behind the thread loop, miss that thread loop every time, and you'll get skip stitches. When you check needle hook clearance, you want to do so with a fresh needle in the machine, because checking the machine with a needle that's bent doesn't give you any good information. Unfortunately, if it is true that your machine's needle hook clearance is off, and that's the reason that you're getting skip stitches, then you'll need to take your machine to a trained technician who knows how to make the necessary adjustments and get the machine fixed. Thank you all for watching. Sewing machines are complicated tools, and there are indeed additional reasons that skip stitches might occur beyond what's covered here in this video. However, I think I've addressed the most common issues that sews typically face, and I sincerely believe this guide will be a valuable resource for anyone troubleshooting skip stitches at home. If you like this video and want more similar content, please make sure to throw us a like, hit the subscribe button, and comment as much as your heart desires. If you want more information, please visit sewingmachineshop.com, where we have a dedicated section of the website to sewing machine education, as well as products that we sell like sewing machines, sergers, embroidery machines, thread, presser feet, and other sewing accessories. Also, check out our newsletter on Substack, which is titled the Sewing Machine Newsletter. It's free to sign up, and each week you'll get an email in your inbox that is essentially an article on sewing machine troubleshooting tips like the ones covered in this video. I will link you to these resources in the description below this video. Happy sewing!